A small act of kindness on a rainy day, that's all it was. When Jesse, a broke mechanic barely scraping by, gave directions to a lost woman in a luxury car, he never thought twice about it. But weeks later, she came back. Not for her car, not for a favor, but for him. And what she brought with her would change everything. If you've ever wondered whether the universe notices the good you do when no one's watching, this story is for you. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The rain came down in sheets, thick and relentless, the kind that made everything feel heavier, your clothes, your breath, your thoughts. Jesse pulled the garage door shut with a groan, the metal screeching in protest like it was as tired as he was. He slapped the rusted lock into place, then tugged on it twice, more out of habit than necessity. Behind him, the flickering light above the shop sputtered, casting long, jagged shadows over the cracked concrete. The smell of motor oil clung to his skin, soaked into every fiber of his hoodie. He shoved his hands deep into his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold, wet wind, as he made his way to the pickup parked at the edge of the lot. The truck was old, held together more by hope than bolts, and its left headlight had gone out 3 weeks ago. Jesse hadn't had the time or the money to fix it. Rent was due last Friday, utilities a week before that. He hadn't heard from his landlord, which wasn't a good sign. Silence meant decisions were being made without him. As he reached for the driver's door, headlights cut through the downpour, bright, clean, new. They didn't belong. A sleek, low-sitting luxury coupe coasted into the lot, like it had taken a wrong turn out of a richer, cleaner world. Jesse froze, hand still on the truck door, blinking through the rain. The car idled for a moment, then the window rolled down, smooth and silent. A woman leaned slightly out, her face shadowed but her voice clear. "Hi, sorry. Do you know how to get back to the interstate?" She didn't shout. She didn't even flinch at the rain, just calm, collected, like she was used to things bending in her direction. Jesse stepped closer, squinting through the downpour. Her hair was damp at the edges, sticking to her jaw, eyes steady, voice polite. But there was something else. A flicker. Tiredness. Or maybe something she was trying hard not to show. "Yeah," he said, nodding toward the street behind her. "You missed the turnoff back there. I can draw you a map." Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "You sure? It's late?" He shrugged. "Ain't like I'm going anywhere." He ducked under the awning, grabbed a notepad off the workbench just inside the door. The rain kept coming, tapping it out a rhythm that made everything feel urgent and uncertain. When he handed her the paper, their eyes met for a second too long. "Thank you," she said softly. He just nodded, stepping back as she pulled away, taillights disappearing into the storm. Jesse stood there for a long moment, soaked, silent, watching the rain hit the empty pavement. Something about her stuck with him, even though he didn't know why. He didn't know she'd be back, and not just to say thank you. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sky still hung low and dark, like it was waiting for a reason to break open again. Jesse stood under the flickering shop awning, arms crossed against his chest, the damp fabric of his hoodie clinging to him. The woman in the car hadn't moved. Wipers squeaked across the windshield in a slow, rhythmic arc. She seemed out of place here, too polished, too calm, the kind of woman who probably never had to ask for directions. She rolled her window down farther. The scent of something clean and expensive drifted out. Perfume, maybe leather. "My GPS stopped working," she said. "I took a wrong turn a few miles back, and now I don't even know what town I'm in." "Edison," Jesse replied, keeping his voice level. "You're in Edison." She nodded slowly, her lips pressing together. She looked tired. Underneath the layers of elegance, there was weariness in the way her shoulders slumped, in how her eyes lingered on his face like she was trying to figure out what kind of man he was. Jesse wasn't sure what she saw, but he didn't care much either way. "I need to get back to the interstate," she said. "I'm supposed to be in Hartford tonight." He exhaled and pointed toward the dark road behind her. You'll want to take Birchwood up 3 miles, then a left onto 89. That'll hook you back to the I-84 entrance." She looked where he pointed, then back at him. "Birchwood. Is that the road with the old church on the corner?" "That's the one," she hesitated. "Would you mind writing that down? I get turned around easily, especially in the dark." He nodded and walked back into the garage. The place smelled like rust and old rubber, and the single light overhead buzzed like it had a secret. Jessie tore a page from the logbook on the counter, scribbled the directions in blocky letters, then walked it back out to her. When she took the paper from him, their fingers brushed. Just for a second. Her hands were cold, softer than his by a mile. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quieter now, more grounded, like the mask had slipped just enough to show something real beneath it. "You didn't have to." "Wasn't much," he said, stepping back. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, then just nodded and shifted the car into gear. The engine purred as she pulled away, headlights cutting through the mist. Jessie stood there, watching the taillights disappear down the road, the note still clutched in her hand. He figured that was the end of it. Just another stranger passing through, just another night in a town where nothing ever really changed. He didn't know he'd see her again, or that when he did, she wouldn't be lost at all. The screen door slammed shut behind him with that familiar wheeze and clatter, the sound echoing through the cramped trailer like a reminder that nothing in his life ever closed quietly. Jessie kicked off his boots, one landing sideways on the mat, the other rolling into a pile of unopened mail. He didn't bother straightening either. The place smelled faintly of damp carpet and leftover chili. A single lamp flickered in the corner, casting tired shadows over the linoleum floor. He tossed his keys onto the cracked counter and opened the fridge. Half a beer, a tub of margarine, and a takeout box from 2 nights ago stared back at him. He grabbed the box, didn't even heat it up, just sat on the edge of the couch and ate cold lo mein, straight from the container, fork in one hand, overdue power bill in the other. $317.42. He stared at the number like it might change if he looked long enough. It didn't. None of them did. Water, internet, rent. Each envelope a little reminder of how close he was to losing everything, not that he had much left to lose. The landlord had already stopped being polite in his texts. Another week like this, and Jessie would be living in the back of the garage, sleeping under his tool bench. The rain still tapped against the roof in lazy bursts. Outside, the world was silent except for the occasional whoosh of cars on the highway in the distance, people going places, doing things. Meanwhile, Jessie sat in a place that hadn't changed in years, surrounded by bills he couldn't pay and dreams he'd buried under oil-stained rags and broken carburetors. He leaned back, eyes drifting toward the ceiling. That woman, Eva, maybe? He hadn't asked. She'd had one of those voices, smooth but sad, like someone who was used to people listening but hadn't had a real conversation in a long time. He shook his head. She was already fading, like a dream you forget by lunchtime. Just another car. Just another detour. Jessie had enough of his own problems to worry about. Still, when he finally turned off the lamp and climbed into his creaky bed, her face flashed in his mind for half a second longer than it should have. The morning came with gray skies and that same heavy stillness Jessie had grown used to. No birdsong, no chatter, just the soft hiss of wind pushing dust across the pavement. He unlocked the garage at 7 o'clock sharp, same as every day, even though he knew, deep down, no one was coming. The open sign flickered once, then gave up and went dark again. Inside, the shop was quiet, too quiet. Tools hung neatly on the wall, a habit left over from his dad. Didn't matter how broke they were, wrenches always went back where they belonged. Jessie rubbed his hands together to warm them up, though it wasn't the cold that chilled him. It was the silence, the nothingness. No phone calls, no engines sputtering to life, just the tick of the wall clock and the low hum of the mini-fridge. He sat on the stool by the workbench, sipped stale coffee from the chipped mug with #1boss written on it, his father's, not his. Outside, the town went about its sleepy business. A few cars passed by without slowing. No one pulled in. Mid-morning, a voice cut through the stillness. "Hey, Mr. Jesse." He looked up. Toby, the neighbor kid, stood just inside the bay door, clutching a busted-up bike with one wheel bent at an odd angle. "My front tire's all jacked. Can you fix it?" Jesse stood slowly, setting down the mug. "Bring it here." Toby wheeled the bike in, grease already on his palms, one shoelace untied. Jesse didn't ask for money. He didn't even think about it, just grabbed a wrench and knelt beside the bike. The kid watched his hands move, fascinated. "You always know how to fix stuff?" Toby said. Jesse didn't answer right away. He just tightened the last bolt and spun the wheel until it hummed smooth and even. "Some things," he said quietly. "Not everything." The kid smiled, said thanks, then pedaled off down the road, wobbling a bit but free. Jesse watched him disappear, the sound of rubber on pavement fading fast. A small win. But the shop was still empty. The bills were still waiting. The phone still hadn't rung. Good deeds didn't pay rent. And being decent, that didn't keep the lights on. The envelope was red this time. Not just a pink slip or a polite reminder. Red. Loud. Final. Jesse stared at it in his hands, his knuckles tight around the edges like he might tear it in half by accident. Final notice in bold black letters screamed up at him. The paper creased from being stuffed in his mailbox like it didn't deserve to be delivered gently. He didn't open it right away. He didn't have to. He knew what it said. He'd seen enough of them in his life to memorize the script. Rent past due. Vacate by end of week or legal action will be pursued. He dropped it on the kitchen counter, right beside the pile of unpaid bills and yesterday's cold coffee. The trailer creaked as he sat down, the whole place groaning like it, too, was tired of holding up a life that was going nowhere. Jesse leaned forward, elbows on the table, head in his hands. His shoulders felt like they were made of cement, not even the kind of tired you sleep off, just a bone-deep heaviness that came from trying and never getting ahead. He thought about Toby's bike, about the busted alternator he fixed for Mrs. Langley last month for $20 and a homemade pie, about the hours he spent keeping other people on the road while he himself was skidding toward the ditch. What did it add up to? Goodwill? A thank you here and there? Maybe. But you can't trade kindness for gas money, can't pay rent with decency. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Somewhere down the road a dog barked. Life went on. Jesse sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, chewing on the same bitter question that had haunted him for weeks now. What's the point of being good in a world that only seems to reward the cold and the loud? His phone didn't ring. His bank account didn't magically refill. No job rolled up to the garage needing a last-minute miracle. It was just him, in that small, fading space, wondering if he'd ever get more out of life than what he gave. It was just after noon when Jesse heard it, that low, unmistakable purr of an engine too smooth to belong anywhere near his shop. He didn't even have to look up from the carburetor he'd been scrubbing to know it wasn't a local. Nobody in Edison drove anything that clean. He wiped his hands on a rag and turned toward the entrance, expecting a tourist, maybe someone who'd gotten lost off the interstate again. But the moment he saw the car, his stomach clenched. It was her, the same sleek coupe, metallic silver with jet black trim, gliding over the pothole-filled lot like it belonged in a showroom. Not here. The same car he'd given directions to weeks ago in the rain. The same one that had faded from his mind and reappeared in the quieter corners of his memory late at night. The door opened and she stepped out. Different this time. Gone was the tailored coat and guarded stare. Today she wore jeans and a soft, oversized sweater that hung off one shoulder, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. No makeup, no pretense. But something about her looked more undone than dressed down, like she was trying hard not to be noticed, but hoping someone would see her anyway. Jesse stood frozen beside the workbench, the grease-streaked rag still in his hand, his heart thudding faster than it had in days. She walked towards him slowly, as if unsure of the welcome she'd receive. He didn't say anything, didn't have to. The silence between them stretched, thick with the weight of something unspoken. "I didn't think you'd remember me," she said, her voice softer than before, touched with something close to nerves. "I do," he said quietly. "Didn't expect to see you again." She glanced at the shop, then at him, as if trying to figure out whether it was safe to explain why she was back. "I was passing through, again." Jessie didn't believe that for a second, but he nodded anyway. She hesitated, shifting her weight. "Can we talk?" Jessie tossed the rag onto the bench. "Sure," he said. But his gut told him this wasn't going to be a quick conversation. Not this time. They sat on a pair of rusted folding chairs just outside the garage bay, the sun casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. Jessie still had oil on his knuckles, and Ava, he finally had a name for her now, seemed like she didn't know what to do with her hands. She kept fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater, twisting the fabric between her fingers like it held all the words she wasn't saying. "I'm Eva," she said, finally breaking the silence. "Eva Moore." Jessie nodded slowly, his gaze steady. "Jessie." "I know," she said. "You told me that night." He let out a soft grunt, unsure what else to say. The memory of that night had lingered in his mind like a half-forgotten song, one you hum without realizing, even when you think it meant nothing, but apparently it had meant something to her. "I've been thinking about that night more than I should have," she said, glancing out at the empty lot like it might give her courage. "I know it probably didn't seem like much to you, just a stranger needing directions." He didn't answer right away. The breeze picked up, lifting dust from the ground, rustling the metal siding of the building. There was a heaviness to the moment, like both of them were dancing around something that wasn't fully shaped yet. "But it wasn't just directions," she continued, her voice low. "You were kind. You didn't treat me like I was a problem to solve. And you didn't ask questions or stare like I didn't belong." Jessie shifted in his seat, uncomfortable with the praise. "Didn't seem like the right time to play 20 questions." She smiled faintly. "No, it wasn't. But still, it stuck with me, more than I expected." He looked at her then, really looked. There was a tiredness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, like the weeks since that night hadn't been kind to her. But underneath that was something else, guilt maybe, or loneliness. "I came back," she said softly, "because I haven't been able to stop thinking about what it felt like to be seen without judgment." Jessie didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing at all, just nodded once, slow and measured, and let the silence hold the weight of her words. Jessie wiped his hands on his jeans out of habit, glancing toward the silver coupe like it might suddenly sprout a mechanical issue if he stared long enough. "So," he said, jerking his chin toward the car, "what's wrong with it? Engine making noise? Battery?" Ava followed his gaze, then gave a quiet laugh, more breath than sound. "Nothing's wrong with the car." He frowned. "Oil change?" She shook her head. "Check engine light?" "No, Jessie," she said, softer this time. "It's not the car." He blinked, the silence stretching between them. "Then why are you here?" Ava hesitated, as if unsure how honest she wanted to be. Finally, she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and looked him in the eye. "I needed to talk to someone who doesn't expect anything from me." That caught him off guard. "I thought maybe you had car trouble," he said, half defensive now, the walls going up. "That's all I really know how to fix." She smiled at that, a sad little curve of her lips. "Maybe I'm not asking to be fixed. Maybe I just wanted to sit somewhere that doesn't feel like a boardroom or a performance." Jessie didn't answer. He wasn't used to this kind of conversation, people bearing their soul before lunch. He fixed things, tangible things, things with bolts and gaskets and fluid leaks. Emotions were a whole different mess. "You ever have those moments," she continued, "where everything looks fine on the outside, but you're one pothole away from the whole thing falling apart?" He met her gaze. "Every day." That answer seemed to settle something in her. She leaned back against the wall of the garage, arms crossed, the tension in her shoulders loosening slightly. For a minute, neither of them spoke, just listened to the wind rattle the old signage, to the sound of the world going on around them without asking how either of them was holding up. "I didn't come here to drop off my car," she said, after a long pause. "I came back because that night stuck with me, and I figured maybe it meant something." Jesse looked down at his grease-stained hands, then back at her. "Didn't think a guy like me would matter much to someone like you." "You'd be surprised," Ava whispered. "Who matters when everything else starts to fall apart?" The diner was the kind of place where time stuck to the walls. Grease-stained menus, cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since the Bush administration. Jesse hadn't been there in months, maybe longer. But when Eva asked if he wanted to grab a coffee, he didn't say no. Now they sat in a booth by the window, mugs steaming between them, the silence thick with things unspoken. Outside, the sky was overcast, the light soft and colorless. Jesse stirred his coffee even though he drank it black. Ava watched him for a moment before she spoke. "I'm not passing through," she said. "Not really." He looked up, one brow raised. "I told you I was heading to Hartford that night," she continued, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Truth is, I canceled the meeting I was supposed to be at. I couldn't do it. I sat in the car for 10 minutes in the parking lot before turning around." Jesse nodded slowly. "Was it that bad?" She gave a quiet laugh, but it didn't reach her eye. "It wasn't one thing. It was everything. I'm the founder of a company called Helix Innovations. We build tech platforms for startups, financial tools, AI integrations, scalable infrastructure, sexy stuff." He blinked. "Sounds complicated." "It is," she said. "It's also exhausting. Every room I walk into, I'm either the youngest person or the only woman, or both. And everyone wants something from me, an endorsement, a partnership, a soundbite that can twist into a press release." She paused, took a sip of her coffee, then set it down carefully. "That night, when I got lost, I hadn't planned on stopping anywhere. I was supposed to just keep going. But I saw your shop, and for some reason, I turned in." Jesse leaned back, watching her. "And now," she said, her voice quieter, "I'm just tired of pretending I have it all figured out. I'm tired of smiling in rooms where I don't feel seen. I guess I came back because I remembered what it felt like, just for a moment, to be a person and not a brand." Jesse looked out the window, then back at her. "Well," he said, lifting his mug slightly, "you came to the right place if you're looking for people who don't pretend to be anything they're not." Eva smiled then. This time, it reached her eyes. The clink of silverware and the low hum of conversation filled the space around them, but Jesse barely heard any of it. He sat stiffly in the booth, both hands wrapped around his coffee mug like it might give him something to hold on to besides his own discomfort. Across from him, Ava leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the Formica table, her expression soft but unwavering. "I've met a lot of people," she said. "Some of the smartest minds in tech, founders, investors, politicians, people who've built empires out of nothing. But you—" He raised a brow, cautious. "Let me guess. I'm a breath of fresh air." She smiled. "Not exactly." He gave a short laugh, shaking his head. "Good. I'm not trying to be anything special." "I know," she said. "That's why you are." The words hit harder than he expected, like they slid under his ribs before he could block them. He looked down at his coffee, pretending to focus on the swirls of cream still floating in the dark. She didn't let the silence win. "That night," she continued, "you didn't ask who I was, didn't try to impress me or pry. You just gave me directions, like it was the most natural thing in the world to help a stranger without expecting anything back. You reminded me people like you exist." Jesse scoffed, the sound quiet but edged. "I fixed a kid's bike this morning for free and got yelled at by my landlord an hour later. Not sure I'm the model citizen." Eva didn't flinch. "You didn't do it for credit. That's the part that stuck." He shook his head, clearly uncomfortable now, fingers tapping the side of his cup. "Look, I'm not some charity case with a heart of gold. I'm just a guy trying to make rent before the lights go out." "Exactly," she said, "and you still chose to be kind." Jessie met her eyes then, caught off guard by how steady hers were. She wasn't trying to flatter him. She wasn't building up to a pitch or a deal. She was just telling the truth. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure how to carry the weight of being seen like that. Eva turned her mug slowly between her palms, her gaze fixed on the chipped rim like it held answers she wasn't sure how to say out loud. Jessie could tell she was gearing up for something, the kind of thing people rehearse in hotel mirrors and still don't say right. "I've been working on something," she said finally, voice low. Jessie raised an eyebrow, leaning back against the booth. "Another startup?" She shook her head. "No, not this time. This one's different. It's not about platforms or algorithms. It's about people." He waited, unsure if she was stalling or trying to figure out if he was the right audience. "I bought a property outside of Hartford," she continued. "An old auto shop. It's falling apart, needs everything. But I don't want to fix it up to flip it or turn it into some trendy co-working space." Jessie's brow furrowed. "Then what?" "I want to rebuild it into something that matters. A real community garage. A place where young people, kids who didn't get the best start, can learn a trade, get on their feet. Apprenticeships, mentorship, maybe even a small repair business attached to it, so they can earn while they learn." Jessie stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or call her bluff. "And here's where you come in," Eva added. Now he did laugh, a dry, incredulous sound. "You're kidding." "I'm not. I fix trucks, Eva. I don't do after-school programs." "You do more than fix trucks," she said, her tone sharper now. "You show up. You help people who can't pay you. You teach kids how to patch their own bike tires. You care, Jessie. And that's exactly the kind of person I need for this." He shook his head, almost amused. "You've got the wrong guy. I can barely keep the lights on in my own place." "Then let me help you," she said, leaning forward. "This doesn't have to be charity. It can be a partnership. I handle the logistics, the funding. You handle the heart." He looked away, jaw clenched. "Why me?" "Because you're real," she said simply, "and I'm tired of building things with people who only care about numbers." Jessie didn't have an answer to that, just the echo of her words and the quiet, stubborn beat of something he hadn't let himself feel in a long time, possibility. Jessie walked her back to her car more out of politeness than anything else, hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, jaw tight. He hadn't said yes, hadn't even said maybe, just listened while Eva laid it all out in that calm, determined way she seemed to have mastered, like the world didn't get to tell her no anymore. The sky had started to shift, clouds rolling in heavy and low, threatening another round of rain. The wind picked up, tossing dust across the lot and making the silence between them feel even heavier. At her car she opened the door, then paused, reaching into her purse. "I know it's a lot," she said, pulling out a small black card and a cheap burner phone still in its plastic. "Take the weekend. Think about it." Jessie glanced down at the items in her hand like she was offering him a bomb. "I don't need a phone," he said. "It's prepaid," she replied. "No strings. You don't even have to keep it. Just, if you change your mind, call me." He didn't move. She pressed the card and phone into his hand anyway, her fingers brushing his. "You don't have to keep struggling, Jessie. You're allowed to want something more." He stared at her. "I'm not your project." Her eyes didn't flinch. "I'm not here to fix you. I'm asking you to build something with me." He looked away, the lump in his throat rising faster than he liked. He didn't know how to explain that wanting more scared him more than losing what little he already had. That he wasn't used to people offering things without strings or pity attached. "I'll be in town until Monday," she said, easing into the driver's seat. "After that, I head back. But my offer stands." He said nothing, just nodded once, too quick. She closed the door and rolled down the window before she pulled away. "You asked me why you," she said. "Because when everything else feels fake, you don't. That matters." Then she was gone, tail lights vanishing into the dusk. The wind died down, and Jesse was left standing alone in the middle of the lot, holding a phone he didn't ask for and a card that felt like a key to a life he wasn't sure he deserved. The trailer was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that wasn't peaceful, just hollow. Jesse sat at the small kitchen table, the prepaid phone and Eva's card still lying where he'd dropped them hours ago, untouched and ominous, like they might explode if he stared too long. A breeze pushed against the window pane, making it creak. Outside, the wind stirred the trees and the gravel in the driveway, but inside, everything felt frozen. He reached for the drawer near the sink, the one that stuck every time, and pulled it open with a grunt. Buried beneath a tangle of receipts and old takeout menus was a worn leather frame, the corners scuffed, the glass chipped at the edge. He set it on the table gently, like it was made of something sacred. The photo inside was faded now. Sunlight had bleached out the edges, but the faces were still clear. His dad, arms crossed, a smudge of oil on his cheek, standing tall in front of the old shop with Jesse at his side, maybe 12 or 13, holding a wrench too big for his hands, both of them smiling like the future hadn't hit them yet. Jesse stared at the image, jaw tightening. The shop had been his father's dream, not for the money, never for that. It was about the work, doing things right, helping folks who didn't have anywhere else to go. Pride and integrity, that's what his dad always said. Pride you could feel in your bones, integrity you didn't brag about. And what did Jesse have now? A rundown garage no one visited, a fridge full of leftovers and debt, a dream buried under rust and silence. He rubbed his thumb across the photo, 1,000 questions pressing against the back of his throat. Would you tell me to take the offer, Dad? Would you say this is selling out or finally getting a break? Would you even recognize me anymore? The wind outside picked up again, rattling the windows like it was trying to get in. Jesse sat there for a long time, staring at the past, feeling the weight of it press against his chest like an old wound that never healed right. The burner phone sat on the table like a dare, small, silent, and buzzing with the weight of a decision Jesse wasn't ready to make. It had been staring at him for 2 days. No missed calls, no texts, just potential, coiled and quiet. He paced the length of the trailer, passing the same stained carpet, the same stack of unpaid bills, the same photograph of his dad that he'd left face down the night before. He couldn't look at it again. Not yet. Finally, he stopped, cracked his neck, and grabbed the phone. The plastic felt cheap in his hand, but the moment he powered it on, Eva's number popped up, saved under E. He hesitated. Maybe he should just let it all slide. Stick with what he knew, slow days at the shop, fixing things that were always breaking, being the guy who helped everyone else but never asked for anything himself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was familiar and safe. Mostly. But her voice had stayed with him, not just what she said, but how she said it, like she saw something in him that he didn't even know was still there. He punched in the number before he could talk himself out of it and held the phone to his ear. 1 ring, 2. Then she answered, "Eva." He cleared his throat. "It's Jesse." A pause, then, "Hey." The way she said it, quiet, relieved, maybe even a little hopeful, knotted something in his chest. "I've been thinking," he said. "About your offer?" "Okay," she said carefully. "I'm not saying yes," he continued. "I'm not promising anything, but I'll come check it out. The place, the kids, the project. That's all I'm asking," she said. Another beat of silence. Then Jesse added, "I'll drive up Monday. I'll be there." He hung up without saying goodbye. It felt cleaner that way. As he set the phone down, the trailer suddenly felt smaller, like the walls were finally admitting they'd been closing in for years. Jesse stared at the door. Whatever came next wasn't going to be easy, but maybe, just maybe, it would be worth it. Jesse stood at the edge of the parking lot, hands stuffed into the pockets of his only decent jacket, the one that didn't smell like motor oil yet. He didn't know what he expected when Eva said she'd pick him up, but it wasn't this. Her car rolled in like it belonged in a movie, smooth and silent, the silver paint catching the early light like it was born to shine. But when the door opened and she stepped out, something was different. She wasn't dressed like a CEO today, no heels, no power suit, just jeans, boots worn at the edges, and a navy blue jacket zipped halfway up. Her hair was tied back, simple, clean. She looked like someone who'd already been working for hours, and yet she still held that energy, like the air shifted a little when she moved through it. "Morning," she said, unlocking the passenger side for him. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I said I'd come," Jesse muttered as he climbed in. "Didn't say I wasn't regretting it." She laughed, just once, and it wasn't mocking. More like she understood the nerves and was giving him space to feel them. The drive into the city was quiet at first, buildings rising slowly from the horizon, the world getting louder and more crowded the closer they got. Jesse stared out the window, eyes flicking over the passing traffic and polished signs, all that glass and steel. It felt miles away from Edison, and maybe it was. "I bought it 6 months ago," Eva said finally, breaking the silence. "Didn't know what I was going to do with it at first. I just knew it felt like the kind of place that had stories." She turned off the main road, down a side street riddled with potholes and chain-link fences. At the end of the block, half covered in ivy and graffiti, stood an old garage, wide bay doors rusted at the hinges. A faded sign that once read Crawford's Auto Repair, now barely legible. The bones were still there, but just barely. Jesse stepped out slowly. The city hummed in the background, but here it was quiet, almost reverent. "This is it?" he asked. Eva nodded. "This is where it starts." He stared at the building, the cracked concrete, the busted windows. It looked like hell, but it also looked like a second chance. They stood in the middle of the gutted garage, dust rising with every step, sunlight filtering through the holes in the roof like scattered hope. The place smelled like mildew and rust, a long-forgotten space that had seen better days and then some. Jesse turned in a slow circle, taking it all in, the cracked cement floors, the exposed wiring, the shattered glass underfoot. It felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by what it used to be, what it could have been. Eva stepped forward, unfolding a set of papers from the leather folder tucked under her arm. She spread them across the hood of an old Chevy Nova that hadn't moved in years, its paint chipped and faded like the rest of the block. Blueprints, real ones. "I want to tear out this entire wall," she said, pointing. "Make room for a second bay, teaching space, with tools lined up like in a real shop. Over there we'll build out a classroom, nothing fancy, just enough room for 10, maybe 15 kids. A small office in the back, counseling space. We'll bring in speakers, mentors, teach them everything from brake systems to resume writing." Jesse kept his arms folded across his chest, not moving, not speaking, but his eyes didn't leave the papers. "They're kids who've been handed the short end," she went on, "dropped out, aged out, or just fell through the cracks, and no one's catching them. No one's showing them they can do more than just survive. They need someone who's not going to talk down to them, someone who's lived it." He let out a breath, slow and unsure. "You think that's me?" She looked up, her voice low but steady. "Yeah, I do. You're the guy who helped a stranger in the rain and fixed a bike for free when you had eviction notices on your kitchen table. That's the guy I need leading this." Jesse stared at her for a long moment. His throat felt tight, like something too big to swallow had lodged itself there. "I don't know how to run something like this," he muttered. "You'll figure it out," Eva said. "You don't need a degree to change lives, Jesse. You just have to show up." And somehow he knew she wasn't just talking about the kids. The silence inside the garage suddenly felt louder than the city traffic just beyond the broken windows. Jesse stepped back from the makeshift blueprint table like it might catch fire. His jaw tightened, eyes darting from the plans to the dusty corners of the room, to the broken jackstand in the corner, to anywhere but her. "I'm nobody," he said, voice low but sharp. "I don't run nonprofits. I barely run my life." Ava didn't flinch. She just watched him, steady and quiet. "I didn't finish school," he added, pacing now. "I've got a shop held together with duct tape, and half the time I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul Fall just to keep the lights on. You want me to walk in here and be some kind of mentor?" She didn't speak. He kept going. "I don't even know how to talk to kids like that. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I make it worse? Hell, what if they laugh me out of the room?" Jesse stopped. His hands were shaking, and it made him feel small, exposed. His voice cracked when he said it again, softer this time. "Why me?" Eva stepped forward, calm and sure, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Because you've been there," she said. "Because you know what it feels like to be left behind, to feel invisible, to think no one sees anything in you worth saving, and somehow, despite all of that, you still show up. That's exactly who they need." He looked at her, something raw in his eyes. "What if I'm not enough?" "You're not supposed to be perfect, Jesse. They don't need perfect. They need real. And you—" She gestured around the room, at the rusted steel and broken windows. "You're as real as it gets." He swallowed hard, the heat in his chest making it hard to breathe. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, that she was reaching. But deep down, something about her words chipped away at the walls he'd spent years building. And for the first time in a long time, Jesse didn't feel like he had to pretend to be more than what he was. Maybe that was the point. The garage at Ava's place wasn't like his. It had clean walls, shelves lined with tools that still had shine to them, and a floor that didn't smell like 10 years of oil spills. But tonight, Jesse brought the grit with him. The old V8 sat mounted like a stubborn relic on the workbench, halfway disassembled, coated in years of rust and neglect. Jesse's jacket was tossed over a stool, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His forearms were streaked with grease, and his jaw clenched as he torqued a bolt that didn't want to move. Sparks jumped from the grinder with each pass, lighting up his silhouette in the dim shop light, painting his face in gold and shadow. Ava leaned against the doorway, arms crossed loosely, her expression softer than usual. She hadn't planned on staying out here, but something about watching him work made the idea of walking away feel wrong. There was a rhythm to it, the way his hands moved, steady and sure, like he was coaxing something broken back to life rather than forcing it. Like he understood the machine on a level that didn't need words. He didn't see her at first. Or maybe he did, and just didn't say anything. But the silence between them wasn't awkward. It was easy. Earned. "You could have called a guy to do that," Jesse muttered after a while, not looking up. "I did," she said. He paused, smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Then he went back to work. She took a few steps into the room, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the grease under his nails, the way his focus didn't waver, even with her near. But more than that, she saw the peace in him, the kind that only showed up when his hands were busy and his heart wasn't on defense. "You know," she said softly, "you look different when you're doing this." He looked up, eyebrow raised. "Greasy." "No," she said, smiling. "Like you're right where you're supposed to be." That made him pause, not because he didn't believe it, but because maybe for the first time he did. The engine was still warm when Jesse set the wrench down and wiped his hands on a rag, grease smearing across the worn denim at his thighs. Ava handed him a bottle of water, their fingers brushing for a second too long as he took it from her. He muttered a quiet thanks, and she smiled without saying a word, settling beside him on the bench near the work table, the night air slipping in through the cracked garage window. Outside the world was dark and still, but in that small pocket of space, time felt suspended. The sharp edge of their lives, the expectations, the labels, the second-guessing, dulled in the quiet. They talked for hours without realizing, about small things, big things, things people don't usually share unless they trust each other more than they're willing to admit. Jesse told her about his dad, how the man never took a sick day in his life, how he taught Jesse how to feel the weight of a socket wrench before knowing if it was the right one. Ava told him about growing up in a house that was always too clean, too quiet, how silence wasn't peace there. It was performance. They laughed about stupid stuff. Jesse's childhood obsession with monster trucks. Ava's failed attempt to make brownies from scratch at age 10 that ended with a broken oven and a fire extinguisher. The laughter came easy, the kind that makes your chest ache but clears a part of you nothing else can. And then the quiet came, not awkward, just heavy, meaningful. She looked at him, eyes warm, searching. He looked back, mouth slightly parted like he wanted to speak but didn't trust his voice. The space between them felt fragile, electric. Jessie's hand twitched, instinct pulling him forward just a few inches. Her gaze flicked to his lips, and for one breathless moment, neither of them moved. Then she pulled back. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough to break the spell. "I should go in," she said, her voice softer now, almost an apology. Jessie nodded slowly, swallowing the words he didn't say. He watched her walk toward the house, her shoulders tense, like the distance hurt more than it helped. The door clicked shut behind her, and Jessie sat there alone, still feeling the warmth of her next to him, wondering what it meant that she didn't stay, and what it meant that he wanted her to. The conference room at Helix's downtown headquarters felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that came not from the air conditioning but from tension. Ava sat at the head of the long glass table, her shoulders squared, face unreadable. Around her, board members shuffled papers, tapped pens, cleared throats. They were waiting for her to explain herself. "Ava," Gerald Marks began, tapping the table with his knuckles like a metronome for disapproval. "We need to discuss the optics of your recent involvement, outside of company operations." She already knew where this was going. "This initiative," he continued, "this garage project, it's drawing attention, not the good kind." Ava said nothing, folding her hands calmly in front of her. Gerald glanced at the others, then back at her. "You've tied your name, your public credibility, to someone with no formal experience, no education beyond high school, no record of managing a business." She kept her expression even, but her pulse had started to tick in her ears. "Look," another board member added, softer but still pointed, "we understand this project is personal to you, but it reflects on Helix. Investors are asking questions. They're wondering if your focus is slipping." Ava's fingers tightened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "My focus is on building things that matter." "With respect," Gerald said, "you built this company on strategy and control. This Jesse guy, he doesn't belong in your world. And if he crashes and burns, so does the narrative. You've worked too hard to let this become your downfall." The word downfall hung in the air like smoke. She took a slow breath, met Gerald's eyes. "Jesse didn't ask for this. I brought him into it because I believe in what he can do. He's not polished, but he's real. And real is something we've been missing." "You're putting your reputation on the line," he warned. "Then let it be on the line," Ava said flatly, "because if this company can't stand for something beyond quarterly earnings, maybe it's not the legacy I thought I was building." She stood before they could say anything else. As she walked out of the room, her heels clicking against the floor, doubt crept in like a shadow behind her. Not about Jesse, but about whether the world she'd built could handle someone like him, or someone like her, when she wasn't playing their game. The garage smelled like fresh sawdust and motor oil, new beginnings, and old habits colliding in the air. Jesse had been up since dawn, hauling tools, laying out shelves, marking where the lifts would go. Sweat clung to the back of his neck, his shirt dark with it, but for once he didn't mind. There was momentum now, a pulse to the place. It was finally becoming real. He walked toward the front office to grab the blueprint notes Ava left on the desk. The door was half closed, the blinds drawn. As he reached for the handle, her voice slipped through the crack in the frame, low, clipped, nothing like the calm warmth she usually carried. I know it's risky, she said. A pause. Yes, the board is already breathing down my neck. Jessie froze. It's not about the PR, she continued. It's about whether I misjudged the situation, whether I put too much faith in the wrong person. Her voice dropped lower. He couldn't hear the rest. Didn't want to. His ears rang with just those words. The wrong person. He stepped back, the floorboard groaning under his boot. Inside, the conversation stopped. A chair shifted. Hold on, Ava said. But Jessie didn't wait. He turned and walked out, heart hammering, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Each step across the concrete echoed, louder and louder in his head. Wrong person. Misjudged. Didn't matter what else she said. He'd heard enough. And he knew that tone, the voice people used when they realized they'd made a mistake but hadn't found the words to undo it yet. By the time Ava opened the office door, the garage was empty. His tools were gone. His truck was already halfway down the road, dust kicking up in his wake. She stood in the doorway, calling his name once, twice. But the only thing that answered was the sound of her own silence, and the weight of a misunderstanding that had already started to spread like rust. The bell above the garage door jangled when Jessie pushed it open, a sound that used to feel like home, familiar, comforting. Now it just echoed. Dust hung in the sunlight, streaming through the narrow front windows, dancing in the air like it hadn't been disturbed in days. He dropped his tool bag onto the counter, the thud heavier than it should have been. The smell of old oil and burnt rubber still lingered, same as always, but something about it made his stomach turn now. He walked through the shop slowly, checking the plugs, the breaker box, flipping the light switch just to hear the buzz. Everything worked, everything functioned, but nothing felt alive. Jessie stood in front of the same lift that had carried 100 cars before, staring at it like it was supposed to offer him answers. But the shop didn't speak. It never had. He'd just always known what to do here. Wrench, patch, replace, move on. But now his hands hesitated over tools they once knew without thinking. The motions were still there, muscle memory kicking in, but the weight behind them had shifted. He tried to focus, changed the oil on a neighbor's truck, tightened a serpentine belt, spoke only when necessary. But everything moved slower, emptier, like the engine inside him was misfiring, a part missing he couldn't quite name. Until he did. Eva. He hadn't heard from her. Not a text, not a call. Maybe she was too busy saving face with her board. Maybe she was letting the silence do the talking. He didn't blame her. He wasn't exactly graceful about the exit, but she didn't chase him either. Maybe that meant she didn't want to. He ate dinner alone that night, a microwave burrito and a beer, sat on the same worn couch, same flickering TV in the corner. But it all felt thinner now, like returning to a movie you used to love, only to realize it doesn't hit the same way anymore. Back to square one, that's what it was. Only this time, square one didn't feel like the beginning. It felt like something he might never be able to come back from. The garage door creaked open just as Jessie was tightening the bolts on an old alternator. He didn't look up at first. Probably a customer, maybe someone needing air in their tires or directions to the nearest gas station. He wiped his hands on a rag, not in any rush. But then he heard the footsteps, sharp, deliberate. He turned slowly, already knowing. Ava stood in the doorway, her jacket still dusted with city grit, hair windblown, eyes locked on him like she hadn't blinked since she got out of the car. "You left," she said. Jessie didn't answer. "You didn't call. You didn't even ask." Still nothing. She stepped farther in, the air between them tight, brittle. "You overheard one line of a conversation and ran. Is that how you handle everything that scares you?" He tossed the rag onto the bench, jaw clenched. "I didn't run." "You left the project. You ghosted me." "I didn't want to be your project," he snapped. Her expression shifted, like she hadn't expected him to say it out loud. Jessie shook his head, pacing a few steps before turning back to her. "That garage. All your plans, your blueprints, your board, breathing down your neck. I saw it coming. Eventually, I'd be the guy they point to when it goes wrong, the unqualified one, the wild card. She crossed her arms. So what? You thought I was just building something for charity? That I pulled you into this to feel good about myself? He didn't answer. I didn't bring you in to fix your life, Jesse, she said. I brought you in because I believed in you, because I saw something real, something I couldn't find in a room full of people with perfect resumes. He stared at her, breathing hard, fists balled at his sides. The silence held for a long moment. I'm not used to people believing in me, he said finally, voice low. Especially not people like you. Then get used to it, she said, her voice trembling now, not with anger, but with everything else. And for the first time, Jesse didn't feel angry or defensive. He just felt tired, of hiding, of doubting, of pushing away the one person who'd seen something in him no one else had ever bothered to look for. The rain started just as the last of the daylight slipped behind the trees, soft and steady against the garage roof. Jesse stood near the bay door, arms folded, his eyes fixed on the concrete floor like it held the answer to something he didn't want to ask. Ava didn't say anything right away. She just stood beside him, close enough that he could hear her breathing, close enough to feel the weight of whatever it was she'd come here to say. He finally broke the silence. If this is about me coming back to the project, I don't know if I can. She looked at him, her voice quiet but firm. It's not about that. He turned toward her slowly, his brow furrowed. Then what? Ava exhaled, brushing damp hair behind her ear. I don't need another employee, Jesse. I don't need someone to show up and just check the boxes. I can hire a dozen people to do that. Then what do you need? He asked, his voice tight. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a second, all the polish she wore like armor slipped. What remained was raw and unfiltered. I need someone real, she said. Someone who doesn't care about headlines or optics or what the board thinks. Someone who calls me out when I'm full of it. Someone who shows up not because they have to, but because they want to. Jesse shifted on his feet, unsure what to do with the storm building in his chest. I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who say the right things, who wear masks so well I forget they're even wearing one, she continued. You didn't do any of that. You didn't need to impress me. You just were. And it meant more than I think you realize. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. His throat felt too thick, his heart too loud. She stepped closer, eyes searching his. I don't want perfect. I don't want polished. I just want you. And I'm tired of pretending like I don't. The rain kept falling outside, but inside something shifted. Not everything was fixed. Not yet. But for once, nothing was hiding. Not from each other. The silence between them stretched, heavy with everything that had gone unsaid. Jesse's chest rose and fell, slow and measured, like he was holding his breath and didn't know why. Eva stood in front of him, eyes wide but unwavering, her words still hanging in the air like a match struck in the dark. I just want you. He didn't move at first, didn't speak, but something in his expression shifted, like the walls he'd kept up were finally starting to crack, not from pressure, but from the sheer exhaustion of keeping them standing. I don't know how to be what you need, he said, voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. Ava took one step closer, then another. You already are. The rain outside thickened, hitting the roof in steady waves. Inside the shop was warm, lit only by the faint yellow glow of a single overhead light, dust swirling gently in its beam. Jesse's eyes searched hers, not with suspicion this time, but with a kind of disbelief, like he was afraid to believe her, and even more afraid that he already did. Her hand brushed his arm, not a pull, not a plea, just contact, honest and simple. It felt like everything else fell away in that moment, the shop, the world, the past, and all that remained was her touch, and the space between them shrinking. He leaned in slowly, hesitantly, like he was giving her one last chance to change her mind. She didn't. When their lips finally met, it wasn't desperate or rushed. It was quiet, steady, like an answer to a question neither of them had been brave enough to ask. His hand moved to the side of her face, rough palm brushing against her cheek, and she leaned into it like she'd been waiting for that feeling for longer than she could admit. The kiss deepened, not with urgency, but with weight, with history, with the fragile understanding that sometimes broken things don't need fixing, they just need someone to see the value in the cracks. When they pulled apart, neither spoke. They didn't have to. The moment had already said everything. The smell of fresh paint and motor oil filled the air, but this time it wasn't the scent of something falling apart. It was the scent of something just beginning. The garage, once broken and forgotten, now buzzed with life. Kids moved between tool benches, some turning wrenches, others leaning over engine blocks, their faces lit up with curiosity instead of doubt. The clatter of tools and laughter ricocheted off the newly hung banners that stretched across the back wall. Turn the key. Build the future. Jesse stood just inside the bay door, the sunlight casting a warm glow across the concrete floor. His shirt was crisp for once, tucked in, a fresh patch stitched on his chest. Boss. He kept tugging at the collar like it didn't quite fit, but his eyes betrayed the truth. He was proud. He just didn't know how to wear it yet. Doesn't it look half bad, he muttered, mostly to himself, watching a kid named Elijah teach another how to safely jack up a car. The two of them had shown up just a week ago, quiet, wary. Now they laughed like they'd always belonged here. Beside him, Eva leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She wore jeans and a Helix-branded zip-up, blending in like she didn't own the building, like she hadn't fought tooth and nail to make this happen. "You did this," she said, nodding toward the chaos of youth and gears and grease. He glanced at her, then back at the room. "No, we did." She looked at him, and something softened in her eyes. It wasn't just pride, it was admiration. Not for the boss patch, not for the building, for the man who'd almost walked away from all of it. A student shouted for Jesse's help, and he excused himself with a small smile. As he crossed the garage, his step steady and sure, Eva watched him disappear into the crowd of kids now learning how to build engines, and maybe something more. The garage wasn't perfect, neither were they, but it was real, and it was theirs. The sky was that soft kind of blue that only comes after a storm, the kind that makes everything feel new, like the world's been rinsed clean. The garage buzzed with its usual rhythm. A socket wrench clinked against metal, someone dropped a screwdriver, and a kid let out a frustrated groan when a bolt refused to turn. Jesse stood near the front, leaning against the hood of an old Dodge the kids were rebuilding as a team project. His hands were in his pockets, but his mind was miles away. A car pulled up, not flashy, not new, just worn and dusty, with out-of-state plates and a tired hum in the engine that told him it was holding on by a thread. The driver's side window rolled down, and a woman leaned out, squinting at the building. "Hey," she called, "I'm trying to find the highway. My GPS just died, and I think I took a wrong turn somewhere back near that split by the diner." Jesse pushed off the Dodge and walked toward her slowly, that old familiar feeling creeping in. Not déjà vu, something deeper. Echoes of a rainy night, a lost driver, a life that hadn't been the same since. He reached the car, smile easy, grounded. "You're not far off," he said. "But yeah, this town's got a way of confusing folks who don't know the back roads." She laughed nervously. "I'm usually pretty good with directions, but today's just been a mess." He nodded toward the building. "Well, you're in luck. I've got a map inside, and if you've got a few minutes, there's hot coffee too." She blinked, caught off guard by the kindness. "Are you sure?" Jesse stepped back and waved her toward the garage. "Positive. Come on in." The woman parked, got out, and followed him through the wide-open doors. Inside, kids worked, laughed, cursed under their breath at stripped bolts and then laughed again. The air smelled like motor oil, sawdust, and something even rarer, belonging. Jessie poured 2 cups of coffee as she looked around, eyes wide with surprise, and he realized for the first time he had become the map. The stop on someone else's lost road. The place you didn't mean to find but were damn glad you did. Sometimes it doesn't take much. A moment, a decision, a choice to pull over instead of driving by. That's how it started for Jessie. Just a rainy night, a stranger with a map in her hands and something heavier in her eyes. He didn't know that a simple act of kindness would come back in a form he never expected. He didn't know that giving directions would lead to rebuilding more than just an engine, that it would lead to rebuilding lives, including his own. There wasn't a grand plan, no polished elevator pitch, just grease-stained hands, a tired heart, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be part of something bigger than the bills stacked on his counter and the silence of his empty shop. And Ava, she didn't need saving. What she needed was something real, someone who didn't care about status or headlines, someone who reminded her what it felt like to be grounded, seen. Together, they built more than a garage. They built a place where broken things weren't discarded. They were given time, attention, and belief. A place where kids who'd been forgotten found purpose in turning wrenches and feeling the weight of tools that, for once, belonged in their hands. So maybe it was never about the shop. Maybe it was about the space between 2 people who didn't know they needed each other, about the space they made for others who'd never had one. Because sometimes the smallest gestures ripple further than you'll ever see. A smile, a wrench, a moment of choosing compassion over convenience. And maybe that's all life really is, one small act at a time, waiting to be passed on. So if you've ever wondered whether kindness still matters, maybe Jessie's story is your answer. And if it moved you, if it reminded you of something you forgot you believed in, share it. Pass it on. Someone out there might just be one gesture away from finding their second chance. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this and drop a comment telling us what kindness has meant in your life. We're listening. We always are.